Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
Transformation begins in the space where denial finally dissolves. You reach a point where you can no longer pretend that repetition will magically yield a different outcome. The routines that once felt harmless begin revealing their true cost. The habits you defended start showing you the prison they built. Change never announces itself with celebration. It arrives as a confrontation. It asks whether you are willing to abandon the identity that kept you safe but stagnant. It demands that you stop blaming the environment and start rewriting the internal script that keeps pulling you backward. Life will mirror whatever you choose to tolerate, and the mirror grows sharper the longer you ignore it. Nothing outside will shift until you challenge the version of yourself that keeps recycling the same decisions. That is where real movement begins. There is a moment when the excuses you once relied on start sounding unfamiliar, almost embarrassing. You hear yourself speak and realize the words no longer match the ambition in your chest. Growth starts the instant you stop protecting your limitations. Every justification becomes a barrier, every deflection becomes a delay. You cannot evolve while worshiping your comfort. You cannot rise while negotiating with the patterns that keep you grounded. The world around you changes only when your internal compass stops pointing to the familiar and starts pointing to the necessary. This crossroads separates those who dream from those who transform. If nothing in your life shifts, it is because the person making your choices has not shifted either. To move forward, you must first outgrow the mindset that built your current reality. Real change feels like psychological demolition. You tear apart the beliefs that shaped your identity. You confront the stories you inherited, the fears you absorbed, the assumptions you never questioned. Your reactions reveal who you are more accurately than your intentions ever will. When you choose differently, even once, you disrupt the script your brain has rehearsed for years. That disruption is uncomfortable. It pulls you away from autopilot and forces you into presence. Pain shows up because your old habits begin dying, and death always resists. But that resistance is proof that transformation is underway. When you break your patterns, the world around you breaks its patterns with you. New outcomes require a new operator. Momentum appears once you stop waiting for permission. Too many people sit still, hoping circumstances will adjust themselves into a perfect starting point. But alignment is not granted. Alignment is created. Every decisive action tells your nervous system that you are done entertaining stagnation. The more you repeat this message, the faster the old identity disconnects. This is why a single disciplined week can change the tone of an entire year. Movement compounds in ways inspiration never will. Change demands that you stop negotiating with hesitation. When you shift your behavior, even slightly, life opens pathways that static thinking would never reveal. External progress is always the final echo of internal recalibration. Your environment reflects your internal architecture. If your habits lack intention, your surroundings become cluttered with consequences. If your boundaries are weak, your time becomes occupied by distractions you never invited. When you strengthen your inner world, the outer world begins reorganizing itself around your new signal. People sense boundaries they once walked through freely. Opportunities that previously overlooked you begin responding to your clarity. Even chaos behaves differently around someone who has tightened their discipline. The world is not resisting you. It is following your lead. If nothing improves, it is because the captain steering your life has not changed course. Shift the captain, and the ship follows. Every breakthrough requires a sacrifice. Something old must be abandoned so something new can take its place. You cannot hold on to who you were and expect to reach the person you claim to want to become. Familiarity will always argue for comfort. It will whisper that change can wait another week, another season, another year. But every delay strengthens the chains. The mind becomes a collector of postponed ambitions, each one heavier than the last. To transform, you must let go of the outdated version of you that was built from fear, doubt, and survival. The identity that grows from intention is the only one capable of producing a different life. Discipline becomes the catalyst that separates wishful thinking from actual evolution. Every repeated action wires the brain to believe a new narrative. You don't develop confidence by chanting affirmations. You develop confidence by repeatedly doing the things you swore you were incapable of. Action crafts identity. Consistency cements it. A new life begins when you stop performing for approval and start performing for your own standard. Each disciplined decision is a vote for the future you want. Each relapse into comfort is a vote for the life you are trying to escape. The tally is always running, and the universe responds to whichever version you feed most. Internal honesty sharpens everything. You cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. The people who rise quickly are the ones who stop hiding from their own truth. They look at their patterns without flinching. They call out their own complacency without self-pity. They recognize that responsibility is not blame, but power. Once you accept that your circumstances respond to your behavior, not your intentions, you begin wielding your life like a weapon instead of a wish. Denial keeps you trapped. Awareness sets the ground on fire beneath your excuses. And once that fire starts, your only option is to climb upward. Evolution requires pressure. Comfort numbs the instincts that were designed to make you unstoppable. When nothing challenges you, nothing changes you. The mind adapts through resistance. It sharpens through friction. It strengthens through adversity. The obstacles you keep avoiding are the exact catalysts required to reshape you. Avoiding them is choosing repetition. Facing them is choosing reinvention. The moment you embrace challenge as training instead of punishment, your perspective detonates. The world stops feeling heavy and starts feeling moldable again. You cannot create a different life with the same psychological weight distribution. Change the load, and the path changes with it. A different reality begins the moment you understand that the mind has a gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper decides whether you live as the author or the victim. The internal locus law is not philosophy, it is biology. When you place power outside yourself, the prefrontal cortex downshifts and the amygdala takes the wheel. Threat becomes your compass. Helplessness becomes your lens. You begin navigating life as if outcomes are weather patterns instead of consequences. But when responsibility is pulled inward, cognition rises and clarity takes form. Ownership lights up the areas of the brain built for strategy, direction, and forward momentum. You stop waiting for rescue. You start building escape. This shift is invisible to others, but it resculpts every decision you make. Until this switch flips, nothing around you will evolve, because the operator behind the controls remains the same. Across every culture and era, people who rise are not those with the easiest path, but those who refuse to outsource agency. They understand that the world responds to conviction, not complaint. Blame freezes your evolution by tricking your mind into thinking the solution lives outside your influence. Once that illusion calcifies, you start living reactively instead of intentionally. But when you reclaim authorship, every obstacle transforms into information. Every setback becomes feedback. Every wall becomes a mirror showing you the part of yourself that must grow. This orientation does not eliminate struggle. It redefines it. The moment you stop pointing outward, your energy starts concentrating inward. and that pressure forges capability. Without this shift, your environment remains a looping reflection of your unchanged identity, proving again that if you don't change, nothing else will. People underestimate how much their internal narrative shapes their external outcomes. The brain behaves according to the story you repeat, not the story you desire. If the narrative says you are powerless, the subconscious scans for evidence to reinforce the belief. If the narrative says you are responsible, the subconscious begins searching for solutions. One narrative creates paralysis, the other generates momentum. The internal locus law decides which world you inhabit. Everything you experience is filtered through expectation, and expectation is built on identity. When identity bends toward ownership, even chaos becomes navigable. But when identity bends toward blame, even opportunity looks like threat. Your life bends in the direction of whatever you believe controls it. Refuse responsibility, and your world shrinks. Embrace it, and the world rearranges. There is a psychological trap built into blame that many never escape. Blame feels comforting at first because it removes pressure. But that comfort is poison disguised as relief. The more you blame, the less your brain invests in learning. The less it invests in learning, the more helpless you become. Helplessness is not a condition, it is a habit. A practiced orientation toward life that drains your capacity to act. Responsibility reverses that descent. It tells your nervous system that your actions matter, that your choices carry weight, that reality bends, even slightly, when you push. This belief is the foundation of transformation. Without it, no amount of motivation will stick. Your world will keep mirroring the same patterns, because the one projecting them never changed. Every breakthrough in human history was born from individuals who rejected external control. They chose to believe that life was something to be shaped, not endured. This belief activated the neural pathways required to persist, adapt, innovate, and overcome. That is the architecture of the internal locus law in motion. Ownership unlocks endurance because your brain stops waiting for intervention and starts building pathways toward solutions. Ownership unlocks courage because fear is replaced by responsibility. Ownership unlocks clarity because you stop asking who is at fault and start asking what must be done. When these pathways fire consistently, your identity upgrades. And once identity upgrades, reality follows. Ignore this principle, and you remain frozen inside the same projection. Embrace it, and the projection updates. Pay attention to your language, and you will see your locus immediately. People who stay stuck speak in events. People who rise speak in choices. Events describe what happened. Choices describe what they will do next. The brain listens. It rewires according to phrasing. If your language positions the world as the oppressor and you as the passenger, your neurology adapts to that helplessness. But if your language frames you as the operator, the brain elevates into problem-solving mode. This is not affirmation. This is neural engineering. Your vocabulary becomes the instruction manual for your future. If you keep speaking like someone without power, your subconscious will execute that script. Your external world will obey it. If you don't change the script, nothing outside will rewrite itself either. Shift your perspective, and you will see that responsibility is not a burden but a portal. It grants access to a level of life unavailable to those who keep outsourcing their agency. Responsibility brings discomfort, but discomfort is the birthplace of adaptation. When you own everything inside your control, your brain becomes alert, precise, and strategic. It begins scanning for leverage instead of excuses. It begins anticipating outcomes instead of fearing them. You stop reacting to life and begin shaping it. This is the internal threshold where transformation stops being theory and starts becoming biology. If this threshold is never crossed, Your life will loop in familiar cycles, proving again that nothing changes until you do. People who master the internal locus law become immune to circumstances that paralyze others, not because their challenges vanish, but because their orientation toward challenge transforms. They see adversity as material for growth. They see mistakes as data. They see setbacks as invitations to improve systems, not indictments of identity. This psychological stance gives them an unfair advantage. Their world becomes malleable because they treat themselves as malleable. Their habits evolve because they stop defending the patterns that hold them back. Identity shifts. Reality shifts with it. The cycle is simple but brutal. Until responsibility replaces blame, stagnation replaces growth. Everything becomes clearer once you realize that your inner world determines your outer experience. When the locus is external, your potential shrinks to the dimensions of your environment. When the locus is internal, the environment becomes raw material. The same situation that crushes one person becomes fuel for another. The difference is not luck, it is orientation. If you believe the world controls you, you will wait forever. If you believe you control your response, momentum begins. Your internal position becomes the architecture of your external fate. Nothing outside can evolve if the operator stays the same. Perception becomes the silent sculptor of your entire existence. You walk through life believing you are observing an objective world, unaware that every sight, every judgment, every assumption is bent by the shape of the person doing the seeing. Identity sits behind your eyes like a hidden lens, tainting reality according to your beliefs, wounds, expectations, and history. Two people can stand before the same door and interpret it differently. One sees opportunity, the other sees threat. The door never changed. The viewer did. That is the invisible machinery running your life. Until you upgrade the internal lens, the external world will remain distorted in the same familiar way. Growth begins when you question whether your conclusions are truth or simply reflections of your unexamined self. If you remain unchanged, even paradise dissolves into the same old patterns. Across every decision you make lies the imprint of who you believe you are. Identity decides your risks. Identity decides your standards. Identity decides whether you step forward or retreat. When the inner narrative whispers limitation, the outer world rearranges itself to confirm the script. You start selecting versions of life that match the past instead of the future. Even when opportunity reaches for you, an unchanged identity steps back out of habit. Nothing outside has the power to override that inner gatekeeper. But the moment identity expands, your field of possibility expands with it. Suddenly, you notice chances you were blind to. You sense pathways that were invisible before. The world did not unlock, you did. Interpretation governs emotion, and emotion governs action. If your filter is built from old fears, every new challenge looks like danger, even when it is a doorway. If your filter is shaped by shame, every compliment feels like suspicion. If your filter is wired by scarcity, abundance looks like a trick. The world does not become hostile, the lens becomes contaminated. Replace the lens and reality softens. Replace the lens again and reality opens. You are never responding to the world. You are responding to the meaning your identity assigns to it. Transformation begins when you stop renovating the environment and start renovating the interpreter. Identity is the quiet architect of your relationships. When you see yourself as unworthy, you tolerate treatment that matches that belief. When you see yourself as capable, you attract challenges that confirm it. When you see yourself as temporary, you live without commitment. People do not meet you at your potential. They meet you at your self-perception. You broadcast that frequency in your tone, your posture, your boundaries, your choices. Change the identity, and the entire social ecosystem reorganizes itself around the upgraded version of you. Nothing external initiates this shift. It originates within the lens through which you understand yourself. Opportunity does not arrive dressed in neon. It appears subtly, disguised inside moments that require courage or clarity. A limited identity cannot recognize these openings. It dismisses them as illusions, risks, or distractions. But a broadened identity detects alignment instantly. The same moment that once triggered avoidance now awakens pursuit. The difference is not luck. It is lens evolution. High achievers are not born with superior vision. They cultivate it by upgrading the internal filter again and again until opportunity becomes visible. Without that inner refinement, you can stand in the middle of abundance and still feel deprived. Resistance to change often begins with the fear that altering identity means betraying the person you have always been. But the truth is far sharper. Stagnation is the betrayal. Clinging to an outdated self guarantees that you will relive the same cycles, choose the same partners, fall into the same failures, and call it fate. Identity should be fluid, not fossilized. The lens you built at 15 cannot guide the life you want at 25. The lens you built at 25 cannot sustain you at 40. To remain unchanged is to trap yourself in a world that no longer reflects your potential. When identity fractures, the world fractures with it. Negative filters generate negative predictions, and negative predictions generate self-fulfilling prophecies. Your brain begins scanning for evidence to confirm the identity it already believes. If you see yourself as powerless, you notice nothing but obstacles. If you see yourself as capable, you notice strategies. The same day holds two realities. The lens determines which one you live in. This is why internal work is not luxury. It is survival. You cannot outwork a worldview built to sabotage you. You must rebuild the lens first. Even your goals bow to identity. A person who sees themselves as average will never sustain a superior ambition. A person who sees themselves as temporary will never pursue long-term mastery. Identity sets the ceiling long before effort attempts to break it. But when identity aligns with the future instead of the past, effort becomes fuel instead of friction. You begin climbing mountains you once avoided because you finally believe you belong at the summit. Life becomes expansive the moment the lens does. The greatest tragedy is not failure. It is living behind an outdated filter that you never chose consciously. Childhood shaped part of it. Society shaped another. Pain carved its share. But adulthood demands that you choose your lens with intention. The filter you refuse to update becomes the cage you eventually call destiny. You deserve a worldview built by your ambition, not your memory. You deserve a reality that reflects your evolution, not your wounds. Silence in decision-making is not neutral. It carves its own path with the same force as decisive action. Many try to convince themselves that postponing a choice protects them from risk, but delay is simply a quieter surrender. Life does not pause because you refuse to engage with it. Time keeps advancing, consequences keep accumulating, and opportunity keeps moving toward those who are willing to claim direction. Every moment spent avoiding a decision is a moment spent reinforcing the identity of someone who does not steer their own existence. That identity becomes a prediction machine, translating hesitation into habit and habit into fate. What you refuse to choose eventually becomes chosen for you by circumstance. And those who allow external forces to sculpt their path rarely enjoy the shape it takes. If you don't change, nothing around you adapts either. Neutrality is a myth people cling to when they fear confrontation with themselves. You cannot stay in the same place without sinking into it. Entropy does not ask permission. If you avoid the discomfort of growth, you inherit the consequences of decay.